everyone, I'm finally back with another editor talk video. It has been so long since I filmed one of these, and honestly, I've kind of missed chatting with my fellow nerdy friends. Today I want to talk about the author-editor relationship, mainly because I feel like it's a little bit veiled or mysterious for most writers. And cultivating the right author-editor relationship is so important. Choosing the right editor is kind of like dating. You really have to pick the right match for you. Actually, Cheryl Klein talks about this in her book, Second Sight, an editor's talks on writing, revising, and publishing books for children and young adults. It's a really long title. She talks about this process and how it's just an intensely personal endeavor, finding the right match. She says, editors are looking to find books they love, writers are looking to find editors who can help their books be their best. There is a giant pool of us out there, and when it doesn't work out, it can be the most depressing thing in the world. And that's why when you do establish a great author-editor relationship, the book can flourish. The following are 5 tips from an editor's perspective, maybe for aspiring editors or editors looking to grow their businesses. That said, if you're an author or aspiring author, I'm hoping that you'll find these tips helpful as well to kind of help you narrow down what you should look for in finding an editor. Tip number 1 is make the author better, not just the manuscript. If you're looking to start a solid relationship with an author, that means that you need to invest in the author's craft and not just the current project. It's so satisfying to me to work with authors on multiple projects and to see their writing improve because they're honing their craft. I've said this before, but seeing a better product emerge is amazing. That's what every editor wants. But seeing a better writer emerge is even better. That's why my editing approach is definitely more educational. I like to explain why I'm making a certain change or edit or suggestion, and I usually accompany my suggestions or edits with storytelling technique flyers so that I can further demonstrate my examples and explanations. I don't just write on the manuscript. I changed from passive to active voice, or this flashback isn't working. I point to examples so authors can realize when they're writing in passive voice and why they might want to change it to active voice. I explain how passive voice slows down the pacing and how active voice can help readers connect to the action of the story and visualize the scene better. Okay, sorry if the filming just got really weird. I accidentally kicked my tripod and then moved some things around. So anyway, back to the examples. If I make a certain change or edit or suggestion, I always want to point to why making that change would benefit the whole novel. I point them back to examples of how to create flashback, how they can improve the transitions, or how moving from past to past perfect tense in the right ways can really help readers understand what's going on. Now, I do want to explain that a lot of these suggestions and storytelling technique flyers are reserved for content editing clients, so I wouldn't necessarily have that extensive kind of comment for like a copy editing or proofreading project. Sometimes I will do that for a copy editing project, but for the most part, it's reserved for content editing and developmental editing. But yeah, that's just an example of how I like to keep education as a priority. Of course, I correct common errors, but I want authors to understand why I'm correcting those errors in the first place. Ultimately, if you're an author, it's important to find an editor who inspires you to be a better writer. Tip number 2 is to sleep with the Chicago Manual of Style under your pillow at night. Okay, but not really, but you're gonna wanna know this thing inside and out if you wanna establish a great author-editor relationship. People tend to think the red pen is the editor's weapon of choice, but it's not. The Chicago Manual of Style is. If you're going to make changes, stylistic or otherwise, you have to be able to back it up with the Chicago Manual of Style. That's why I have all of these ridiculous tabs. It's actually ridiculous. Editors are human. That means that some of our edits are going to be gut-based. And while gut-based editing can be an asset in some cases, like if you're able to read something and recognize that it's ambiguous or awkward or clunky, and you're able to recast that sentence and write it in a way that's clearer and more compelling, then that's a great gut-based edit to make. However, to establish an awesome relationship with an author, you should be a Chicago Manual of Style based editor over a gut check editor. The author is just going to be more comfortable knowing that his or her baby manuscript is in the hands of somebody who really abides by the editor's Bible. You need to be well versed in this style guide. If author-editor relationships are like dating, then this is the spark, people. It's either there or it's not. Tip number 3, value deadlines, upfront communication, and respect above all else. The right editor is going to provide all necessary information from payment requirements to contracts and the basic outline of editorial processes before the author signs on the dotted line. Just like a real relationship, you want to know what you're getting into before you start dating. Editors don't want to work with authors who are MIA after an editing project, just like authors don't want to work with editors who, once you pass along your manuscript, it's crickets for months. If you're an editor, create a solid plan of action. This really puts authors at ease. Sure, some editing projects may expand or transform into other separate editing projects, if both parties agree on that. But for the most part, you don't want to leave an author in the dark about, payments or editorial process, basically what's expected of you and what's expected of the author. As an editor, you're the author's teammate, but you're also the reader's teammate. And that just means clear respect and clear communication. And as the editor, you really have to take the lead on this one because authors tend to be a little bit intimidated. They don't know what to expect. And honestly, for good reason. Editors have a terrible reputation of killing all the darlings and ripping apart manuscripts. But at the end of the day, you're both teammates. You both want the manuscript to thrive. So you have to build trust and respect. Tip number 4, be the reader's advocate. As an editor, I know that I'm going to have to convince some authors to make certain changes or edits or to recast a sentence or cut out an entire section. It's not always easy, especially when authors are emotionally invested and they're in love with the way something's phrased or worded. As the editor, it's my job to be the reader's advocate. I retain the author's voice but shine a light where clarity is needed. I invoke the reader in editorial comments, and I would say 9 times out of 10, the author is much more receptive to what I have to say when I bring the reader into the picture. The author's just willing to hear me out because I'm bringing in the reader's perspective. So in the editorial comments, rather than saying, this doesn't make sense, I might say, while I recognize your intention to build suspense in this way, your use of step-by-step action actually slows down the pacing, or maybe this feels ambiguous and it can jolt the reader, or it might water down the tension that you've been building from page 6. You have to make it clear from the beginning that you have the same goal. So always frame your feedback in terms of the reader's perspective. If you do that, the author will be much more receptive to what you have to say. Tip number 5 is to honor the give and take. So everything I just said in tip number 4, take with a grain of salt, because you have to, with some authors, not with all authors, but with some authors, you have to pick your battles. With criticism, you have to keep it honest, respectful, and constructive. But you also need to know that it's not about winning or who's right. Some authors have really strong preferences that go against your stylistic preferences, or maybe the preferences of the Chicago Manual of Style. This happens a lot with independent authors. They don't necessarily have to abide by the Chicago Manual of Style or, a publisher's house style. They have much more freedom to retain their preferences. And while it may not be wise to go against the Chicago Manual of Style, you ultimately can't stop them from doing that because they're self-publishing. As an editor, you just have to make your case and ask yourself, will this make the manuscript stronger, better, clearer? And if the answer is yes, then you should definitely have that discussion. At the end of the day, you're more of the painter than the architect, if that makes sense. Or at least that's not always the case. If it's developmental editing or heavy content editing, you may be more of an architect. But for light to medium copy editing and proofreading, you're more of a painter than the architect. So those are my 5 tips for establishing strong author-editor relationships. I plan to make maybe a series out of this, or to at least continue this topic a little bit. If you're authors or editors out there who enjoy these editor talks, let me know down below what kind of topics you're interested in hearing more about. Also, let me know what you value about an author-editor relationship. Please excuse the self-promo, but I feel I would be remiss if I did not mention, if you're an author and you're looking for that next step to find an editor, reach out to me. I'd love to see if we're a good fit. And that's all I have for you guys. I'll talk to you soon. Bye.